Pomej. Murder in the Eternal Ice. Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases. Episode 16. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A goaudio production. In heated spacesuits, Tornot, Sherlock Holmes, and Dr. Watson battled through the freshly fallen snow and icy, worn paths on the planet with the cryptic identification number Ogle 2005 BLG 390LB. Thanks to their suits, they felt nothing of the triple-digit sub-zero temperatures that had earned this frigid exoplanet the nickname Ice Uncle in astronaut parlance. Through their visors, they saw the northern lights, which flickered like a curtain that the night had draped around itself as decoration. In the constellation Sagittarius, 21,000 light-years from Earth, this natural phenomenon reminded them of home. All three men advanced very slowly. It can be quite healing to share one's thoughts rather than remaining alone with them and wearing out one's mind, Holmes remarked into the icy silence, or rather via radio into the helmets of his two companions. Tornot turned towards him and answered sullenly, "If you absolutely must know, I am thinking about how on the southern hemisphere the icy cold is only a few degrees less severe." "I rather thought you would tell us something about this mysterious expedition we must undertake here," Holmes remarked disappointedly. "But Holmes," Dr. Watson interjected from behind him, "Captain Decker did briefly explain what this is about." "Yes, too brief," Holmes complained. "He mentioned something about an outpost where there were difficulties that we should resolve, but not what sort of difficulties they were." "The usual stuff," Tornot grumbled. "I rather think he assigned me to this because he hates me." "Rather an expensive way to hate someone," Holmes remarked whilst trudging laboriously behind the first officer. "Indeed," Tornot agreed. "I know of cheaper methods myself." "For example?" inquired Dr. Watson. "Signing up on a private cargo ship," Tornot replied. "That's where one's hard-earned military rank becomes utterly worthless. At least with this, one can lodge a complaint with the Fleet High Command of the Galactic Union. Not that it would do any good, mind you, but it's rather soothing nonetheless." "And what would you cite as a complaint, Mr. Tornot?" Sherlock Holmes wanted to know, with his characteristic curiosity. "That I'm getting sick and tired of having to obey the captain without question," Tornot barked angrily. "And that his behaviour towards me is becoming increasingly disrespectful. He didn't even ask whether I was willing to take on such hardship that an expedition into the eternal ice on this cursed planet entails. What do we have robots for, anyway?" "I do not wish to interfere in your disagreement with the captain," Holmes prefaced, "but he surely must have had his reasons for sending you and us here instead of a robot, which simply cannot replace a human being and their power of judgment." "Yes, and, specifically, his underlying hatred towards me," claimed the first officer, stubbornly and vexed, like the crunching snow beneath his boots. "The mere fact that he had us dropped off so far from our destination only confirms my suspicion. Really, Mr. Tornot, I am slowly beginning to harbour the justified suspicion that you have developed a form of paranoia and feel genuinely persecuted by your superior." "Yes, one could say that with good reason," he defended himself, "because he is always standing precisely behind me when I least expect it. The day before yesterday, for example, I had rolled myself a packet of X-plops and was just about to light it and inhale, to forget a bit about the dreary daily routine on board, when I already felt his hand weighing heavily on my shoulder. "Tornot," he bellowed, "you're not actually planning to smoke those, are you?" "Ha ha," laughed Dr. Watson. "The captain was quite right to be upset, as smoking is forbidden aboard the ship. Holmes and I must abide by those rules as well." "Yes, but he hasn't caught you two doing it lately," grumbled Tornot, who suddenly stopped in his tracks. Yet he's got it in for me specifically, and now this forced march through this godforsaken wasteland is really getting to me. Only something spiritual would help now, a vodka for instance. Well, we certainly have enough ice to go with it, Holmes observed. We're just missing a bottle with the high-proof contents to warm us up. Perhaps there might be one at the outpost. I can already see some inviting lights in the distance. If there are difficulties there, the inviting aspects will fade into the background, worried the doctor, pointing towards the sky. Just look, the northern lights have suddenly vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch and simply made them go out. That could indicate atmospheric disturbances and herald a change in weather, possibly an ice storm. Quickly, let us make haste towards the station with utmost speed, Tornot suggested, and promptly set himself in motion. The two Englishmen struggled to keep up with him. Moreover, snowfall and very strong headwinds set in, with the wind speed swelling as if it wanted to prevent their imminent arrival. "Bloody hell!" cursed Tornot, who could barely keep himself upright. "I shall try to make contact with the station. Hello, Research Station 401. Can anyone hear me? We are just under a kilometre away. Hello?" No one responded, but from afar, two headlights lit up, rapidly approaching. A snowmobile similar to an old snow groomer came into view, heading straight for the distressed group, stopping just in front of them and invitingly opening its door. They could not see any driver, which meant the vehicle was operating autonomously, and the computer greeted them in a friendly manner. "Welcome aboard! The journey will take only 5 minutes and 36 seconds. "What luck," said Dr. Watson, who was the last to board. "We were nearly blown away." The computer continued. "My windscreen functions as a projection surface across its full width. Would you like to watch a short film during the journey?" "No," Tornot declined sullenly and unleashed his irony. "We would rather delight in the endless expanses of white powder snow. Besides, each snowflake is unique and worth taking a closer look at." After precisely the announced time, they arrived at the large station, whose architecture stood out like an art object in this icy environment. A stout man in dark blue overalls stood ready at the entrance, eyeing the newcomers suspiciously. "Have you brought provisions with you?" he asked briskly. No, don't you have any algae cultivation?" "Oh yes," Tornot interrupted himself. "You're having difficulties, as we had to hear." "Yes, but the difficulties have less to do with food," replied the stout man. "As you can see by looking at me, we even have one less mouth to feed now. However, we haven't got enough for 3 guests at once. But never mind. Come along first. I'll show you to your quarters." With their helmets under their arms, they trudged after the hefty man. Only Holmes dared to ask, "What exactly are your difficulties about, my good man?" "My esteemed name is Gensbickle, and it so happened that someone called Underwood wanted to play the boss here. Shortly after, he was found dead outside the door, frozen to death because his spacesuit was defective." "Or sabotaged," Holmes added immediately, naturally sensing another tricky murder case. "No, that would not be possible at all," Gensbickle objected gruffly. "Right then, here are your quarters. 1 bunk bed and 1 camp bed. Washroom next door. Have a pleasant stay." After this wish, he hastily disappeared. "A peculiar fellow," remarked Dr. Watson, "corpulent and already slightly depressed from his existence in the lonely isolation of this icy wilderness." "Is that your personal opinion or a diagnosis?" inquired Tornot, who was removing his suit, beneath which he wore his silver uniform, whilst testing the comfort of the camp bed. "Both." The doctor also removed his spacesuit, beneath which he smoothed out his personal clothing. Sherlock Holmes had also had enough of his spacesuit and smoothed down his green tie, which he wore with a white shirt under his brown suit, and washed his hands in the washroom. "Why is it not possible to sabotage a spacesuit, Mr. Tornot?" Because when putting it on, its smart technology would issue a warning to the wearer, he explained. But from a purely technical perspective, it should be possible to suppress this warning, Holmes insisted. Underwood would have noticed that long before freezing to death and would have turned back. Tornot lectured him while searching around the 35-square-metre room. And what if no one opened the door for him? Or if someone deliberately blocked the door so he couldn't get back in? The master detective speculated further. What are you looking for anyway? Last year's snow, joked the first officer, before becoming serious again. Normally in such station quarters, there would be a list of house rules that one should observe. However, there is no such notice visible here, and regarding the unopened door, I assume there would be an emergency entrance for such an unlikely scenario. We really ought to verify that in person, Holmes suggested. Very well then, Tornot conceded. Follow me discreetly to the station director. In the long corridors of the facility, the three guests felt as if they were in a labyrinth. Finally, they found the house rules on a wall, which Tornot had searched for in vain in their quarters. There were only 4 points listed. 1. Meal times must be observed. 2. All research results must be submitted to Director Worms every Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3. Complaints only possible on the 30th of each month at 7 o'clock in the evening with psychologist Ragwell. 4. If sick days exceed 180 days per year, the contract will be terminated. Very peculiar, remarked Tornot after reading this. Normally, such notices would include quiet hours, rules of conduct, for instance, what to do in emergency situations, and the shortest escape routes in case of fire. There seems to be much more that's peculiar here, Holmes noted, pointing to the floor. We can see more than just our own footprints. This means that either cleanliness isn't taken very seriously here, or that several people, besides us, of course, have recently been running along here. What makes you think they were running? Tornot wanted to know. But my dear Mr. Tornot, that is quite clear from the spacing between the matching footprints. When one walks leisurely, the distances between individual footprints are smaller. Here they are quite far apart, which tells me that the people who left them were clearly moving at their fastest pace. Well, it could also be, my dear friend, Dr. Watson pointed out, that the people who came along here were very tall. Cannot be, muttered Holmes, as the low ceiling clearly rules that out, my friend. Indeed, the first officer acknowledged with a glance upward. The ceiling is barely 2 meters high, therefore nobody who was 2.5 meters tall could have walked through here. Muttered the doctor, disgruntled, as he believed he had exposed a weakness. Well, let us go to Director Worms, who might be able to tell us more about this. Everyone set about searching for his whereabouts when Sherlock Holmes noticed a poster in already yellowed colours on a wall in the corridor. Oh, there is a plan of this entire facility. Most enlightening. Pah, Tornot said with a bored expression. This is a run-of-the-mill building, just like countless others slapped together on countless planets. Nevertheless, it is not unimportant to know something about the architecture of the premises. Holmes insisted on taking a close look at it. I must remember this. Here you can also see the director's office. It was once marked in red, now it is only pink. Well, then we know where we need to waddle off to meet him, Tornot joked. After approximately a quarter of an hour traversing long, narrow corridors, they finally arrived at the door marked in pink on the plan, which bore the nameplate Worms, and Tornot knocked on it vigorously. Hello, anyone home? He joked quietly. Come in, bellowed a deep voice that would have been marvellous singing the Buffo role in the opera. Behind the door sat a man at a computer who had nothing comical about him. His overalls were dark grey with burgundy piping, and his face radiated an off-putting coldness befitting the outdoor temperatures. Who are you, and what do you want? We are the emissaries of the Galactic Union, explained Tornot with dignity, who are here to attend to your difficulties. I am First Officer Tornot, and this is Detective Sherlock Holmes with Dr. Watson. Ah, you've brought a detective straight away, wondered Worms, brushing back his white hair that reached over his ears. Even though I haven't even been able to file a report about the unexpected passing of our good Underwood. Too much work prevented this. May I ask when the unfortunate Mr. Underwood froze to death? Inquired Holmes. He wasn't that unfortunate, replied the director promptly. He was quite content here, particularly because he got on everyone's nerves. At any rate, we found him stone dead by the back entrance 2 days ago. Our Dr. Willfire determined that he had clearly frozen to death, and our technician Edgewater confirmed that his heating module, the deceased's, had apparently given up due to the low temperature. And that didn't raise any suspicion of murder? Asked Holmes, baffled. After all, a heating module was invented specifically to function at low temperatures. Tornot nodded approvingly. Yes, that's what I think too. And isn't there an emergency entrance here? We don't give a damn about opinions here, the director clarified with an insolent look. Only scientific analyses count. We don't need an emergency entrance, and technology has its limits. Take note that the lowest temperature recorded 2 days ago was minus 313 degrees Celsius, but only minus 213 degrees Celsius 1 day before Underwood's death. That's a whole 100 degrees difference in the negative, and today we're at minus 251 degrees Celsius. We can count ourselves lucky if we're all still alive and kicking, Dr. Watson chimed in. Since the technology here is so unreliable, why are you all still here and haven't requested a transfer? Enraged, Worms rose to his feet and bellowed, How dare you! I don't owe you any explanation. But you most certainly do owe one to the Galactic Union, Tornot reminded him calmly. So, what happened here? Tell me precisely what occurred 2 days ago. Reluctantly, Worms slumped back into his armchair, switched off the computer, and continued speaking in a somewhat normal tone. Underwood came to me at 7:30 in the morning and wanted a promotion. Just like that. He claimed that as a glaciologist, he was the most important among us, and therefore should receive the highest salary. Naturally, I rejected this brazen request. Hence, he wanted to incite the other research members of the station against me. He claimed I was embezzling research funds and was furthermore completely incompetent and slightly senile due to my advanced age. Dr. Willfire defended me vigorously, and our psychologist Miss Ragwell did as well, which made Underwood very angry. He grabbed an ice pick which he needed for his work outside and chased them like a berserker. Screaming, they managed to seek refuge in my office. Right where you're standing now, the ladies stood trembling with fear. I armed myself with a laser pistol and went searching for Underwood, but couldn't find him anywhere. I calmed the ladies down by explaining that Underwood only wanted to frighten them, as he surely would have caught them otherwise. Oh yes, I think so too, Dr. Watson agreed. As a man, he surely could have run faster than the ladies, although fear generally lends wings. Mean, yes, he was, nodded the director. Later, Gensbickle, our general factotum who usually appears when help is needed, found him frozen to death by the back door. That was around 12:30. He scratched the back of his head, which made his long hair even more dishevelled. Did he still have his ice pick with him? Holmes inquired with interest. No, he was just lying there in his spacesuit without any tools. Director Worms shrugged his shoulders, as if he couldn't explain it either. And if this happened 2 days ago, the station's floor hasn't been cleaned since then? Asked Holmes, remembering the footprints in the corridors. No, the vacuum and mopping robots sometimes experience failures, which we attribute to the cold, explained Worms. But it's quite pleasant in here, Tornot noticed. I reckon it's 20 degrees Celsius. Yes, but now and then The technician leaves the door open and it gets rather cold in here. Worms shrugged his shoulders again. The footprints are quite clearly visible. Therefore, I think the wearer's shoes must have come into contact with soil that is completely hidden beneath the snow outside, deduced Holmes, logical as always. After brief consideration, the director replied, "That could be due to the fact that Underwood's pursuit of the two ladies also went straight through our greenhouse. Besides the algae in a saltwater tank, we also grow some potatoes and carrots, which thrive quite well here in glazed beds, provided the heating doesn't fail." "And you always attribute these failures solely to the cold and never to human interference?" Holmes made certain. "Indeed, who would be so foolish or malicious as to tamper with the equipment to make it malfunction?" posed the director, more as a rhetorical question. "Well, one of your employees who is entirely dissatisfied here," explained Dr. Watson. "If he wants to return to civilization, then it would be quite logical to cause mischief here to bring the research to a standstill." "What an abstruse notion!" Worms shook his head, making his long hair swirl about. "In my 30 years of service, I have never encountered anything like this. If someone wants to leave here, they need only submit a request to me." "And has anyone ever done that?" Holmes hoped for a quick clue about the suspected wrongdoer. "No!" the director bellowed again, then cleared his throat and continued more quietly. "Well, several years ago there was a certain Sam Halter, a technician who would always get goosebumps across his face. It was quite comical to look at him, whose request once lay on my desk, but before I could approve it, Sam Halter simply died of food poisoning. He had eaten green potatoes. I don't know whether he did it intentionally or if it was merely an accident, but we gave him a lovely funeral regardless. Speaking of which, we are also celebrating Underwood's death appropriately. You are cordially invited to the farewell party. We shall be 10 party guests in total. It begins at 5:30 in our conference room." This announcement silenced the 3 union delegates. Before they could say anything further, the director stood up and wordlessly left his office, heading towards an unknown destination. "That's truly a peculiar director of a research station," Tornot marvelled. "Out here, one's senses seem to become rather muddled. To me, the man appeared like an aged Odin who occasionally succumbs to fits of rage." Holmes looked down at himself critically. "One surely wears black tie to such a party. At least Watson is wearing a black suit. I feel completely out of place in my brown one." "Not to worry," Tornot reassured him, and held his smart bracelet against the master detective's sleeve. "I have an app here that can make colour changes. Whoosh!" After the final word, Sherlock Holmes's suit transformed into a black and white striped outfit that made him resemble a zebra. "What on earth are you thinking?" he exclaimed indignantly. "In this get-up, I could only grace a fancy dress party with my presence." "Don't get worked up," cautioned the first officer. "Just a moment, we'll sort this out. Yes, like this, whoosh." Once again, Holmes's suit changed colour, this time to a bright orange. "Ha ha!" Dr. Watson amused himself. "Now you can perform as a tropical fruit, my dear friend." "Well, I simply don't understand this." Tornot now grumbled as well. Aboard the Ultimo 1, the app still worked brilliantly, and I could transform Lura's yellow dress into a deep wine red. But here, perhaps the cold outside really is to blame. "Give me one more try, my dear fellow. Right then, snap!" And indeed, this time the orange transformed into a deep black, now standing in stark contrast to Holmes's anger-reddened face. However, he quickly calmed down at the sight of the successful colour change and nodded with satisfaction. There was a knock at the door, and Tornot said automatically, "Come in." A young man, no more than 30, poked his upper body through the door, wearing a white lab coat, and asked, "Where is the old man?" "If you are referring to Director Worms," Holmes informed him curtly, Then I'm afraid we must answer your question with, "We do not know." "And who are you? And why do you speak in such an antiquated manner?" the young man inquired. "We are from the Union, and we ask the questions here. Therefore, I ask, who are you?" Tornot examined him rather haughtily and rocked impatiently back and forth on his feet. "My name is Ansgar. I am responsible for the laboratory work here. You are here because of Underwood's departure, correct?" With a pinched expression, he squeezed into the office, quickly pulled the door shut behind him, and looked from one to another. "What do you know about his solitary death?" inquired Holmes, now dressed in black, who appeared like a guest at the impending funeral. "How could he simply freeze to death by the back door?" "Yes, exactly. That puzzled me as well," Ansgar announced, while scratching his prominent chin. "To be honest, I found it rather remarkable to be lying so close to the entrance and simply be dead. Unfortunately, I do not know why this happened to him. Edgewater, who is our very competent technician, told me he had never experienced anything like it either. But sadly, the freezing cold here and the magnetic abnormalities repeatedly cause unexpected nasty accidents." "What abnormalities?" Tornot interjected. "Well, for example, the Northern Lights. They switch on and off, as if controlled by a button or a preset program, though one that's anything but regularly scheduled," explained Ansgar excitedly with wild gestures. "We are not here to investigate natural phenomena," Dr. Watson interjected into the conversation, "but rather to solve a mysterious death. To be precise, a possible murder," Holmes clarified. "Murder?" Ansgar seemed to be utterly dumbfounded. "Whilst I found the death rather peculiar, I would not have equated it with murder. Who on earth would want to murder Underwood?" "Actually, that is precisely what we would like to learn from you, dear Mr. Ansgar," Holmes pressed, glancing down to check whether his suit was still black. "When did you last see Mr. Underwood alive?" Ansgar visibly pondered, grasped the back of his neck, ran his fingers through his blonde hair from behind, and finally said, "At mealtime. We had breakfast together with Edgewater and Dr. Wilfire. Then that fat lump joined us as well." "I presume you mean Mr. Gensbickle?" Holmes helped him along. Yes, that rather nice Mr. Genspickle, who, as usual, ate everything in sight. Heh heh." He grinned mischievously. "Well, then I went to the laboratory, heard some commotion which I didn't bother about, and did my usual work, for which, by the way, I am rather poorly paid. Could you not perhaps intervene in that matter with your fine uniform?" "No, I cannot, as I am not employed in that profession. As first officer aboard the Ultimo I, I fortunately do not have to concern myself with such pecuniary matters." "Are you at least well paid?" Ansgar asked now, with curiosity in his eyes. "I've already told you, we ask the questions here," Tornot barked at him. "So, what happened next?" "Well, Underwood wasn't at lunch anymore." Ansgar shrugged with briefly drooping corners of his mouth. "He must have already been on ice by then." At that moment, the director returned to his office and paused at the sight of the gathering. Well, what's all this then? Do you think my office is an open house?" "As for me," announced Holmes with the look of a man who had been granted limited power by the authorities, "I am investigating a murder." "Well, how lovely for you," sneered the director, "but not in here. I have nothing more to say to you about this tragic death. You can continue your investigation at the party today. Perhaps with some champagne and a few drinks in you, you'll get the answers you're looking for." Indignantly, the detective, the doctor, and the first officer left Worm's office, but Tornot turned back so that he could eavesdrop on the conversation between Worms and Ansgar at the door and listened intently. "What peculiar characters they were," he heard Ansgar mock. "The Union really must take anyone who offers their services," he heard the director say condescendingly. "How is the research coming along? Is it making progress?" No, dear director. To put it bluntly, I'm at a loose end. It's utterly frustrating. The planet seems to be generating a life of its own that runs counter to ours. Listen, Ansgar, I am truly a patient person, but if you cannot present the desired research findings on this desk by the day after tomorrow at the latest, then I shall ensure that you too will soon be put on ice. Do we understand each other? Tornot quickly made off, for he could already hear Ansgar's footsteps heading towards the door, who naturally felt pressured by this undisguised threat. In their quarters, Holmes, Dr. Watson and Tornot sorted through their recently gathered impressions together. And finally, this Worms, the elderly Wotan, threatened Ansgar, saying he would ensure that he too would soon be cold, reported the first officer. I don't know whether he immediately used the last sentence, which he apparently heard upon entering, to put pressure on the laboratory assistant, or whether he might indeed have had something to do with Underwood's ice-cold death. Said Dr. Watson. During my time as an army doctor, it was also common practice for superiors to frighten their subordinates to light a fire under them. Yes, Holmes agreed. This casually uttered sentence is unfortunately no proof that Mr. Worms had his hands in this dirty business. But even as a person of respect, I cannot exclude him from suspicion. You know what, Mr. Tornot? I shall turn my murder investigation into a party game to entertain the guests. There is something amusing about that, for when you make people laugh, they open up, and it may well happen that they let slip something they would otherwise be able to keep secret. Well then, let us attend the farewell party and enjoy ourselves whilst on duty. Tornot agreed with a handshake. It's not long until 5:30. Very good, then we still have time to make preparations for the game, Sherlock Holmes said with delight. I need 10 pieces of paper and a pencil. Well, in a research station those should be easy enough to find, Dr. Watson hoped. After some searching in the drawers of the bedside tables between the bunk bed and the camp bed, they found what they were looking for, and the clever detective set about labelling them. Finally, the 3 Union delegates made their way into the conference room, which was appetisingly decorated with colourful streamers and several trays of canapes, small white bread slices topped with delicacies. By the looks of their attire, you needn't have bothered with the hair dye, Holmes, Dr. Watson whispered to him. Indeed, a motley crew stood assembled in the great hall, where in one corner the dear departed lay in state in an open coffin. Regardless, the director introduced them to the assembled team, which included 2 ladies. Here you see our Dr. Willfire, the psychologist Miss Ragwell, our lab rat Ansgar, and our good Gensbickle, whom you already know, that's the technician Edgewater, and over there stands our physicist Professor Kramlinka. After this brisk introduction, Worms handed each person a glass of sparkling wine that had been waiting effervescently on the conference table. They toasted one another and sipped the potent beverage. Music on, commanded Worms, and wild beats blasted from the audio system in the corner opposite the coffin. Outside, a burgeoning blizzard built up as a thunderous counterpoint to the party. Through a window, lightning-illuminated snow flurries flickered, accompanied by the howling of the wind, whilst inside, a heavy metal band tortured their guitars on magnetic tape. Could we please get the orchestra to turn off their atonal instruments? Holmes shouted over the music, which was indeed turned down by one of the ladies. It was Dr. Willfire. Thank you, Lady Willfire, for I have a murder mystery party game here to entertain all those present. On these slips of paper, it states who is a witness, who is the perpetrator, and who is the victim. As the game master, I shall distribute them and fittingly give the victim's slip to Mr. Underwood, since he, as cruel chance would have it, is actually dead. Now I shall randomly distribute the other slips and then ask each person questions about the deceased's death. Holmes swiftly pressed a slip of paper into everyone's hand. After the director had glanced at his slip of paper, he suddenly became enraged. Why on earth am I the murderer? Some of those present burst out laughing, particularly the ladies who shrieked, "He, he, he!" "Wha-ha-ha!" Tornot burst out, equally amused. "You haven't grasped the game, Director Worms. You should have kept quiet, then answered the questions put to you as misleadingly as possible, and hoped you wouldn't be caught. Get it?" "Oh." He looked rather embarrassed at his slip of paper, which Holmes snatched from his hand. "Now that our esteemed Director Worms has revealed his role, I shall collect all the slips from those still living, shuffle them thoroughly and redistribute them, hoping that this time he will silently accept his assigned part, and then we can begin the amusing game." He swiftly did so, collecting all the slips, mixing them theatrically, and dealing them out again without looking at them. As you all could see, I do not know who the perpetrator is, as I distributed the slips face down, which Mr. Worms must have missed the first time round, and only the perpetrator may lie. Everyone else must tell the truth. Who would like to start? Dr. Willfire, a pretty dark-haired woman in a pale blue bodycon dress, raised her hand. "Me. Well, that easily excitable fellow over there in the tin coffin was speaking rather nastily about our director, so I told him to keep his mouth shut. That's right, isn't it, Raggy?" Miss Ragwell, equally pretty in a poison green trouser suit that contrasted with her Titian red hair, nodded with a grin. "Yes, that's correct. I happened to be standing nearby in the kitchen, where we wanted to have a small snack, and witnessed the dispute. I only made a joke, saying that as a glaciologist he could make us some ice cream with the quick freeze tablets instead of pointlessly bad-mouthing our boss." After she stopped speaking, and no other witness came forward, Holmes said, "I see. He must have been rather displeased because you wanted to assign him to menial kitchen duties." Yes, Miss Ragwell quickly agreed. "The ice cream with these tablets is really fantastic," Ansgar cheerfully shared. "My favourite dish." He completely lost it and fetched his pickaxe from the corridor, which he swung about like a madman in front of our little button-noses, tee-hee, and naturally we didn't find that amusing at the time, continued the psychologist, downing her glass of champagne in one go. "I assume you took flight," the detective surmised. "And how? At breakneck speed, indeed," Dr. Willfire assured him. "Ha-ha," Tornot grinned. "You must have been dressed differently back then, Doctor, as you would have had a hard time fleeing in that sky-blue tube you've squeezed your slender body into." "Yes, of course I was wearing my work clothes, you idiot," she snapped back irritably. Before she could speak further, Holmes quickly cut her off. "And you, Mr. Ansgar, were already back in the laboratory at that time, but heard loud commotion?" Silently, he merely nodded. Next to the silent stereo system, he leaned in his lab coat, almost like a large, forgotten white umbrella. "Where were you, meanwhile, Professor Kramlinka?" Holmes asked the slight man in a dove-grey suit standing right next to the entrance door to the conference hall, who kept peering over at the canapes, but apparently did not dare to take one. "I was in my testing room all morning," he announced. "You see, I am researching how to move this planet closer to its star to increase temperatures. I can best demonstrate this using a model setup. Shall we go to my testing room together? Then I can explain everything better to you." "No, thank you," Holmes declined. "So you did not have breakfast with the others?" "I never do that," claimed the professor. "I eat whenever it occurs to me, and that's usually in the middle of the night when I can't sleep because no experiment has worked yet. But I'm close, very close." While speaking, his tongue kept darting out of his mouth, almost like a frog hunting for a fly. "That pleases me," Holmes lied and turned to someone else. "May I ask where you were, Mr. Gensbickle?" "Oh, to be perfectly honest, I cannot remember any more," he freely admitted whilst consuming one of the canapes. "I have so much to do here. In any case, I did not notice anything about the whole commotion." "You've probably been pilfering the best preserves from the pantry again," Director Worms surmised. "Who asked you that?" Gensbickle snapped, while swallowing the rest of the canapé. "You still haven't understood the game. The game master asks us the questions, and that is him." He angrily pointed several times at Sherlock Holmes. "Yes, but I am a witness and may speak up at any time. Isn't that right, Mr. Holmes?" He sought approval. "Ha ha ha," laughed Tornot. "Director Worms, you have once again disrupted the game. You are not even allowed to say that you are merely a witness." "Just a moment," Dr. Watson interjected, raising his index finger. "He could very well be the culprit again, and lying this time, which is allowed after all." "Precisely," Holmes agreed with him. "Let us continue playing then. Now I would like to know whether you, Mr. Gensbickle, were truly in the pantry." "Well, yes," he admitted reluctantly. "I'm suffering from constant hunger here in the cold. It seems that my battered body craves calories to warm itself up." "That still doesn't explain your idiotic behaviour," criticised Ansgar. "Rather than stuffing yourself silly, it would have been better to put on more clothes." "What insolence!" Gensbickle bristled. "I am truly a kind-hearted person, as anyone here can attest, but now I am overwhelmed by a wave of hatred towards you, Ansgar." "I certainly wouldn't want to encounter you alone at night," chirped the psychologist. "Do you know Wittgenstein?" inquired the portly Gensbickle of her. "Not personally, no. Why do you ask me that?" she replied, bewildered. "Because he said, 'Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent.' And you claim to be a psychologist, pah. You're meant to look after us, and instead you disparage me in front of everyone. How utterly shameless." "Control yourself, man," Dr. Wilfire reprimanded him. "We're only playing a silly party game." "I have more hammers in store," he threatened. "I don't even want to know which supplier you get your hammers from," Holmes remarked coolly. "I'm far more interested in the sequence of events. Let me summarise. At 7:30 in the morning, Mr. Underwood came to your office, Director Worms, and demanded a promotion. At what time did he appear in the kitchen, Dr. Wilfire?" She pondered, whilst making a pouty face. "That was at 9 o'clock in the morning." "When did you have breakfast with him? The technician Edgewater, Dr. Wilfire, and Mr. Gensbickle, Mr. Ansgar?" Holmes prompted him to specify the time with a pointing gesture. "We always have breakfast at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning," came the laboratory technician's prompt reply. "Is that correct, Mr. Edgewater?" Holmes included the technician in his investigation. "Yes, that's probably right. Although I never look at the clock, everything runs automatically for me. I have far, far more important things to do than look at the clock during breakfast or other meals. You see, as a technician, I'm one of the most important men here," Edgewater boasted, folding his arms. In his navy blue overalls, he looked like a simple mechanic waiting for his next job. To this, Dr. Watson responded, "A wise man once said, 'The most important people are not those whose heads are full of knowledge. They are those who have a heart full of love, ears that are ready to listen, and hands that are ready to help.' Remember that, Mr. Edgewater." "Certainly," he nodded with his eyes rolled upwards. "My heart is also full of love, but nobody here wants to know about that." "Is that meant to be a hint that you desire closer contact with one of us?" Dr. Wilfire inquired of him at once. "Of course, I'm only human with feelings that I constantly have to suppress," he snapped at her. "Edgy, keep your mouth shut," Ansgar advised him quietly. A brief, almost embarrassingly awkward pause ensued, during which Director Worms helplessly glanced from one person to another, then nodded to the ladies with a shrug of his shoulders, before pouring the contents of his champagne glass down his throat. "What did you notice about him, Raggy?" Dr. Wilfire whispered to her colleague. "That he hasn't completed his maturation phase yet," Miss Ragwell whispered back. The physicist seemed like a foreign body in the whole game, and asked, in bewilderment, Who are they talking about? Not about you, Professor, Dr. Wilfire reassured him. Keep brooding over your theoretical problems. After all, that's the only thing you're capable of. Tornot spoke with authority. Concentration, please. We want to continue. I find it incredibly exciting right now. We were at breakfast earlier, if I'm not mistaken. You are not mistaken, my good fellow, encouraged Dr. Watson, who was now also helping himself to one of the canapes. Delicious. The breakfast couldn't have been very substantial, the detective had noticed meanwhile. By 9 o'clock, just 1 hour later, you were back in the kitchen helping yourself to a snack, Dr. Wilfire, whilst Mr. Gensbickle graced the pantry with his presence and lightened the tinned food supplies. If you really must know, Dr. Wilfire began a lengthy discourse. I must confess to having only consumed a small cup of algae coffee for breakfast, which, whilst healthy, tastes absolutely ghastly. To rid myself of this wretched taste, I therefore met with Raggy, Miss Ragwell, at 9 o'clock to get some proper food inside me. Satisfied, great master? And I, Gensbickle worked himself up, was in the pantry primarily to get some peace and quiet. You see, whenever I'm visible, someone or other around here always wants something from me. Unfortunately, now the truth about my little hideaway for rest periods has come out. So, said Holmes with a smirk. Now we just need to clarify where everyone was between 9 o'clock and 12:30, when Mr. Underwood was found frozen stiff. You found him, did you not, Mr. Gensbickle? Unfortunately, he admitted. The one who finds a dead body is often the prime suspect. But I was with Professor Kramlinka during that time, specifically from 10:30 until 12 o'clock, because I had to help him with his experiment. And at 12:05, I was at the lunch table with Edgewater and Ansgar. Until 12:25. I remember this so precisely, because 5 minutes later, I wanted to go through the back door to service our snowmobile. You see, there aren't any functioning robots left here. Yes, that's correct, Director Worms chimed in. Mr. Tornot, could you not ask the Union to send us another cold-resistant robot? No, I could not, he declined. But that would require a written application from you, dear Director. So, and why was there no response to my last 121 applications? Did they all freeze to death on their way to Union headquarters? Everyone laughed at the Director's witty reply, except for the detective Dr. Watson and Tornot, who merely shook his head. We're getting off topic, Holmes objected. It was going quite well until now. We had already established a timeline of events. I just wonder what happened to the dead man's pickaxe. Can anyone provide any information about that? A glance around the room revealed only expressionless faces. What's so important about that? Asked Worms, who was just selecting one of the canapes. After all, the defiant man wasn't bludgeoned to death with it. He opted for the more elegant death by freezing. Everyone laughed again, except for the 3 Union delegates and Gensbickle, who squinted his eyes. I understand that very well, he claimed, letting his pupils dart back and forth in his now narrowed eyes. If any of you helped Underwood into his icy grave, then you would have had to disarm him first. That's as clear as Alaskan ice. Tisk, the psychologist mocked. The only one whom I personally believe could have disarmed Underwood is you, Gensbickle. I say, do you have something against me? Probed the thus suspected man with a threatening voice. You're quite the psychologist. We're only playing, Dr. Wilfire dismissed with a contemptuous gesture. You are greatly mistaken, my dear, remarked Ansgar laconically. The gaunt man in black with the crooked nose suspects one of us as the murderer, and has devised this balmy little game for that purpose. Has that not dawned on you yet? Miss Ragwell dropped her empty champagne glass from her hand, which shattered with a clinking sound on the floor, and her eyes widened. I beg your pardon? but he froze to death due to a faulty heating module. Our Edgewater discovered that, the technical whiz that he is. Delightful, but that doesn't lift my spirits in the slightest, Edgewater ventured to interject. Consider this. He wanted to quickly enter through the back door, but someone had likely blocked it, Holmes stated. No, retorted Gensbickle, stamping his foot theatrically. When I wanted to go out through the back door, it opened without any trouble. How long does it take for a person to freeze to death? Asked Tornot, and immediately answered his own question. Here, at more than 200 degrees below zero, surely only a few minutes, if even that long. The heating module was faulty, therefore he might have made it to the back door, but collapsed because he didn't reach it in time. Ansgar deduced with briefly outstretched arms. These things happen. Why was he outside in the first place? Posed Dr. Watson, who had seated himself at the conference table. Well, because he was a glaciologist, explained Ansgar extremely slowly to help them follow along. An ice researcher. Right, I've had quite enough of this silly game. Dr. Wilfire clapped his hands loudly once, causing Miss Ragwell to jump. So who is the murderer then, Mr. Holmes? A smile played around the master detective's lips. Director Worms. What? Such insolence! He raged, nearly choking on his canapé. Ack, I forbid any such accusations. Now do calm down, my good man, Holmes advised him, patting him benevolently on the shoulder. I meant the murderer in our party game. You have once again been assigned the slip of paper stating that you are the culprit. Ah, yes, he recalled with relief, and showed the relevant piece of paper to everyone present as proof. And who do you think is responsible for Underwood's death by freezing? Let us summarise the key points together, suggested Sherlock Holmes, whilst pacing back and forth. Mr. Underwood was furious because Director Worms had denied him a desired promotion, possibly linked to a higher salary. Yes, because the union keeps us all on far too tight a budget, Worms complained once again on this occasion, while supporting himself with both hands on the conference table. I haven't the faintest idea what these incompetent politicians spend all the money on, most likely on themselves, because they're all hedonists who couldn't care less about their subjects and their well-being. Holmes continued, unmoved and stoic as always. Therefore, he took out his frustration on the two ladies who teased him about kitchen work. He chased after them like a berserker until they managed to find refuge in Director Worms's office. Then he decided to attend to his work after all, went out to the snowmobile, which wasn't working because Mr. Gensbickle hadn't serviced it yet, so he turned back and only made it as far as the back door, unable to open it. Could he have managed the distance from the back door to the snowmobile and back to the door with a faulty heating module? The technician Edgeworth nodded thoughtfully. I believe so. Then there are two possibilities. Either someone blocked the door, or someone made certain that Mr. Underwood could not reach it alive. And how would that have happened? Asked the physicist. And above all, why would one of us want to do that? After everything I have learned here, I was able to identify a suspect, Holmes stated triumphantly. Someone who wanted to deflect attention from themselves, from their inability to meet Director Worms's strict requirements. Someone who enjoys eating ice cream and therefore frequently uses these quick freeze tablets. Most recently, to smuggle them into Mr. Underwood's spacesuit. Do you mean me? Ansgar allowed himself to ask with wide eyes, but then quickly relaxed again. Ah, I know, you're cross because I spoiled your silly party game and described you as the gaunt one with the crooked nose, ha. Really now, you've no sense of humour. I do indeed have a sense of humour, but it fades in the face of your ice-cold approach with which you took Underwood's life, the master detective accused him. And how do you intend to prove that now? Even if some of the tablets did find their way into Underwood's suit, they would have completely dissolved, and certainly wouldn't be smeared with my fingerprints. There was a hint of mockery in Ansgar's voice. I figured it out through your chattiness, my dear Mr. Ansgar, explained the detective, pointing in his direction. You told us that you heard the commotion from your laboratory. However, your laboratory is much too far away from the described sequence of events and the footprints of those fleeing. I could deduce this from the facility's layout. Therefore, you could not have heard any of the commotion at all. Quite simple. Ha, said Ansgar, slapping one of his thighs. But I wasn't in my laboratory the entire time. No, where were you then? The director interjected. He seemed to be thinking. His eyes darted wildly about, as if searching the entire conference room for a suitable answer. I was, that's not important anyway. The point is, I heard the commotion, and that's final. I know where you were, Mr. Ansgar, Holmes revealed to him. Really? He asked automatically. Without video surveillance, you cannot possibly know that. If you had been in the chamber with the spacesuits, preparing Mr. Underwood's suit with the quick freeze tabs, then you would indeed have been able to hear the commotion. Holmes observed him with an expression of contempt. And you think I did it to deflect suspicion from myself? You must be mad. Ansgar traced a circle beside his temple with his index finger. No rational person would do such a thing. I quite agree with you, but unfortunately it seems the cold weather is having a strong influence on people's mental state. The detective continued to explain his suspicion. Director Worms put you under immense pressure, even after Mr. Underwood was already dead. Therefore, I assume you have already planned another crime, possibly with Mr. Underwood's hidden pickaxe. You hope that a second casualty in the team will make your superior more lenient regarding your previous failure, because under such circumstances, with the prevailing cold and a series of deaths, normal work is difficult enough, but research work even more so. At this statement, Ansgar's jaw dropped. He stood there with his mouth agape, unable to muster any defence. His shoulders visibly slumped, and he now looked like a picture of misery. Silently, he glanced at Director Worms, who regarded him with disapproval. Shame on you, he scolded him. You are not only incompetent but also brutal and devious. I hereby banish you to the lockable storage room. Gensbickle. Yes, Director? The summoned man appeared to bow slightly. Take Ansgar to the storage room and lock the door so that we are safe from him, the director instructed him. Very well, Director. With a ramrod-straight spine, Gensbickle marched proudly behind the exposed murderer as they left the hall. By the way, Detective, how did you figure out that I was the perpetrator in the party game? The director wanted to know. Because I let something slip? No, much simpler. I rigged the papers. The culprit's slip of paper had a tiny, barely visible tear in one corner, Holmes confessed with a wink. You see, I wanted to focus entirely on finding the real murderer, and not burden myself with solving a harmless party game on top of that. You certainly took your time chewing on that one, didn't you? Edgewater grinned. But it kept us all rather well entertained. Yes, ha ha, laughed the psychologist. Great relief was written across her countenance. I've rarely laughed so much. Such a shame that the late Mr. Underwood can no longer join in the laughter, Holmes calmly informed her. You were listening to S. Pomej. Murder in the Eternal Ice. Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases. Episode 16. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A goaudio production.